I'm Dal Banwait. I work for a global organisation called KPMG. So I help support the culture and engagement for KPMG, and I chair Wellbeing for a large function. So focusing very much on looking at our employee engagement results and looking specifically around wellbeing and how we can drive a better kind of strategy around how we can improve the wellbeing of our employees. Yeah. It's very exciting. And then I have another hat, which is the happyologist, which everyone loves that name. So it's all part of the happyology movement. So I studied positive psychology probably about 2-3 years ago, and it was really born out of what I was seeing around lockdown with people and their mental health. And whilst I love traditional psychology, positive psychology is a bit more of a build on that. So traditional psychology talks a lot about how, why do we behave a certain way? What are some of the trauma triggers that make us act in a certain way? And how does that really impact us throughout our lives, which I think is really important. And a lot of people go to therapists to talk a lot about those traumas and why they behave a certain way. And in my mind, my observations were that people tend to ruminate a lot when they go through counselling on some of the issues and triggers that they have. So positive psychology says, well, actually, whilst it's important to understand those traumas, how can we create a more flourishing life, where we thrive a little bit more so we can live our best lives? So it helps people think a lot more around what makes them happy. So relationships, accomplishments, what creates positive emotions. So I'm very passionate about helping people find their happy place, hence the happyologist.
And you're able to use those skills and that passion internally in your role as well?
Absolutely. So do lots of talks around positive psychology and, how people can really implement them into their day-to-day. So one of the big facets of positive psychology is having meaning and purpose. Now, we all need meaning and purpose in life because that's what drives us. That's what gets us out of bed in the morning. That's what gets us excited. So certainly in organisations, I always encourage people, whether it's, my organisation or other organisations, what is it that gets you out of bed in the morning? Yeah, we all are financially driven. We all want to be rewarded. But actually, what are the other things that really drive you? Look at your organisation's values. How do your own values relate to that? What impact are you having, other than your day job, outside of what you do? So sometimes there's a really great quote, which I can still remember, which was John Kennedy. He was at NASA, and he saw a janitor, and he asked the janitor, he said, "Oh, what are you doing?" Obviously, the janitor was mopping up, and he said, "I'm helping put a man on the moon." Which is exactly what I say to people is it's more than just, filling in an Excel spreadsheet or, whatever day job we do. We all have a huge impact, but sometimes it's looking at a bigger picture. And that's what makes us more driven when we go to work in the morning, because it's so much more than what we think we're doing. So always relate back to that.
Yeah, and that ripple effect.
That ripple effect, yeah.
And also just that, helping and supporting just that one person is so impactful.
Yes.
So particularly when it comes to, the millions of interventions that there are and services and ways there are to support people.
Yes.
It's sort of finding the things that help everyone. We've all got our thing, haven't we, that gives us a little bit more joy, and
that's
it's all
right.
different.
Yeah, and it's trying to find those things, because I think, well-being is such it's a very subjective term.
Yeah.
Some people's well-being is driven by kind of financial reward.
Yeah.
Some people's, well-being is driven by the outputs. But I think what I say to everybody is well-being is so subjective. So taking 5 minutes out of your life and just saying, actually, what makes me happy? And more often than not, we don't know what makes us happy. We never stop to think about it. And it's such an obvious thing to do. We think it's these quick fixes. We think it's a nice holiday. Well, whilst they're important, they're not sustained. They're not things that are going to be sustained through a long period of time. So it's thinking about actually what creates my sustainable happiness. And a lot of the time it is knowing what your purpose is. It's knowing what creates those positive emotions. I talk a lot about knowing your tribe. So relationships are fundamental to our happiness. Who are the 5 people that you spend the most time with? Because they're the people that are going to impact whether you're happy or you're not happy.
Yes. Yeah. And it's quite like significant if you start to lose those connections to those people, like what the consequences of that.
Yeah.
Where that takes you in terms of like, you know, knowing who you are. And you need other people as well to help guide you with who you are and make it fall on that, play a role. And what kind of little handy tools do you have at your fingertips or suggestions for people who are, you know, looking to find a bit more joy and connect with it and be struggling not knowing how to do that?
It's a really good question. So I think one of the things that I really encourage is, and again, happiness is so subjective. What makes you happy, what makes me happy are two different things. So I think it's investing that time to stop and actually ask yourself, when were some of my most happiest times? You know, be able to define them, because we've all got defining moments in our life, and sometimes we forget about them. So actually, it's writing that, you know, taking you back to those places, even get yourself into the mindset, because when we get ourselves into a mindset and savor moments of our defining moments of happiness, we start to relive those experiences. Our body starts to feel happier. It starts to feel like it's in that experience again. So, and that's why I always say to people as well, when you're having really rubbish days, on your iPhone or whatever device you've got, is keep 20 to 30 photos, which you know will trigger those moments where you can savor those moments. And what it is from a kind of neuroplasticity perspective, you know, psychologically, so powerful. So I think always remind yourself of those great moments. One of the great things in positive psychology is what they talk about is, you know, 5 greatest moments of gratitude, or, you know, moments that, you know, where you feel blessed. And every night before you go to bed is to remind yourself either 5 great things that happened in the day, because what our brain wants to do, it wants to think of all the rubbish stuff, and then we go to sleep and we marinate on all that rubbish stuff. So before you go to bed, it's almost saying, you know, 5 great things. I had a great meal, I had a great chat, you know, I had a belly laugh with one of my best friends at work. Someone said that piece of work was great. And what it does, again, from a neuroplasticity perspective, every night you start to get into the habit of thinking great things, and you wake up better in the morning.
So. Rather than going to bed thinking, oh, what did I say to that person? Oh, I forgot to say this in my presentation. That's so important. Love that. I actually heard, listened to someone speak about motherhood and relationships with your children through their development stages. And she was saying, you know, talking honestly about some of the challenges with her relationship with her daughter, but one thing she said is that since she was able to talk every day, since she'd come home from nursery, she'd say, like, what 3 great things happened today? And she still does it now, and she's like 21, the daughter. And that's like a constant thread. And their relationship at times is not, you know, facilitated that happening every single day. But she said pretty consistently, we've done this. And now the daughter's off at uni, and she texts her mum each day saying, these 3 things happened. I was like, oh, that's so nice. I've got really, really young children. So I was like, I am definitely going to do this. Like,
so powerful. I think we underestimate the power of that, because what it's doing, it's reinforcing in our brains the good stuff. So we have 80,000 thoughts, 80,000 up to 80,000 negative thoughts a day, right? And that's quite, we have 80,000 thoughts a day, and 85% of them are negative. So imagine what our brain's trying to contend with. So all of this kind of, you know, these, I suppose, less happy hormones like adrenaline and cortisol starts to fill our brain a lot more. What we want is more of that kind of oxytocin. We want some of the good chemicals in our brain. And what happens when we remember good stuff that happens, it creates those happy chemicals in our brain, and we feel better. So absolutely, we want to shift away. I want to get to a place where we can start to balance out those 60,000 thoughts, or at least 60,000 thoughts a day, that the majority of them, at least 50% of them, are more positive.
Well, there was someone was talking about that other analogy of the, like, really salty water, and you can't drink the water because it's so salty. But if you pour it into a larger container with more water, that heaviness, that salt, the divorce might be experiencing, or, you know, the hardship at work, it becomes more manageable because it's more diluted, because you're focusing on the things that are good and experiencing other things, rather than like just really being like concentrated thinking about the tough experience. It doesn't mean that the tough experience isn't still really tough, but you're just making it more palatable and easier to drink. Salty water.
I love that analogy.
It's so nice, isn't it? That really, I was like, thought about that for a good couple of hours. There was another really nice thing here in the exhibition, which was that day. Did you see them? So they had a really lovely light panel, and they were at the question on there that they were asking delegates to add to was what day changed your life. And I think probably, you know, as you said, there's probably lots of different moments in people's lives that kind of like trigger joy in us. But it was so nice to see everyone's, and you know, there was obviously the obvious ones like the day I had my children, things like that, but you know, really kind of creative answers and things that really, like, you know, those big moments like having children were on there, but also smaller things. Experiences and just light bulb moments. It's important to kind of like reflect, isn't it?
I think it is. And you know, a big part again of positive psychology is all around savouring. The more that we savour good moments, the more our brain will become not addicted, but it will start to become a familiar pattern. What our brains generally tend to do, because our brains haven't evolved, is it wants to go to negative stuff because we're always in fight or flight. So we want to be out of danger. So we're always looking for danger. And that's not a great state to be in all the time. We're always in a brace position. So actually what savouring allows us to do is to be able to think more about the good stuff and then feel a lot more relaxed in our own bodies.
Well, I'm definitely going to be making that photo album of like...
I would want to stand by. Every time you have a rubbish moment, you just go onto it and actually trigger it and get in the moment, really get into that experience.
I suppose ultimately that's kind of why people have like their kids as their screensaver, right? Because it's just like this little reminder throughout the day of a little bit of joy. So in terms of sharing this within KPMG, how's it gone down?
Really positive. I think, look, in any organisation, you know, people are always looking for new tools to be able to drive their own well-being. And I think organisations like ours are great because we allow for a lot of investment to help people with their well-being. But I think, as I say, for me, a lot of it is very subjective. So I think it's being able to empower people to stop and think about actually what does well-being mean for me. You know, whilst there are lots of great investments going in with organisations, it has to start with us. So it's really stopping and thinking about actually what is the right thing for me. And sometimes it is doing something as simple as saying, what is my value in the role that I do? What am I driving towards the bigger picture? You know, from a social perspective, what's my value? Whereas, you know, someone else can be fitness, you know, they're looking for, you know, that kind of cortisol fix. So actually a gym works really well for them. So I think it's about, I always say, start at the beginning of the year, just pick 5 things which you know are really going to help drive your well-being in the workplace and at home, and actually set some really clear, manageable goals around that. Habit stack it, you know, onto something else so it's easier to do. But as I say, whilst, you know, organisations like ours are brilliant at the investment, I think it always starts with the individual and actually spending that time and saying, what is it that well-being means to me and how do I drive that?
Well, it's come up a few times in the pod around that relationship between employer responsibility and employee responsibility. And like, employers can't win at this, they can't succeed at this just with great interventions and you know, the infrastructure that they need, because actually the employee themselves needs to be ready. And there is a scale of readiness, isn't there, for anything, any like personal growth and paying attention to your health. Like, everyone's in a different place with that. So there is kind of like a meeting point somewhere, but the organisation can only go so far. And then, so hopefully if organisations can at least get to the middle, then, you know, and employees will kind of find their way to the middle when they're ready to.
And I think we're getting there. I think, you know, the good thing about organisations, certainly like ours, they're offering a suite of, you know, well-being tools and toolkits. And then it's asking individuals to say, actually, what's right for me? So, you know, you've got this more kind of personalised, you know, menu that works specifically for you. But you know, we're getting there. It's an evolving piece, right? And we're all coming together, you know, at leadership lunches like this and conferences like this to be able to help together as a community drive some of that best practice that we can implement in our organisations and more broadly as well.
Amazing. Can I ask you one more question before I let you go? For the benefit of anyone who's kind of early on in their career, you know, trying to work out what makes sense in terms of the career paths into doing these jobs, sitting in this seat, can you share your pathway into this, what it looked like, how it happened in both your work at KPMG, but also your other hat?
It's definitely in later years. I think for me, it's driven by my values.
Okay.
So my background's actually, I've worked for a law firm for a good, 15 years. And then I now work for a accountancy company. It's always been in business development strategy. And over the last 3-4 years, and it was certainly triggered by lockdown and seeing so many people's well-being being impacted, mine was sitting down actually saying, what are my values? And my big MO is to help people. So that's where I kind of shifted in terms of thinking, actually, what is it I want to do next? Because I'm hitting towards my 50s now. So it's more about actually what does the future look like for me? So how I was able to get into that with KPMG was I did a lot of volunteering around wellbeing. I was studying positive psychology on the side anyway, so I could help friends and family. It's now turned into a brand. So obviously I've got the Happyologist and, I've got my own podcast, which is great. But I was able to bring the two together and say, actually, I'm doing all this stuff externally. Can we bring this into the organization? And then I was able to do a placement with our culture and wellbeing team to help kind of drive that. So I think what my advice to people is, if you are genuinely passionate about wellbeing, and you have to be passionate about wellbeing because you've got to have a good understanding what about wellbeing means. You've got to want to be able to keep up to speed with what's going on so you can share information. So first and foremost, it has to be something which you're very passionate about. And then secondly there's a lot of organizations like ours have wellbeing ambassadors. So whilst they're not part of the broader wellbeing team per se, they are ambassadors that do their day job, but at the side of the desk, they're helping their colleagues with their wellbeing. They're doing some training around that, and big organizations like ours help invest in being able to help ambassadors really grow from a wellbeing perspective. Throw your hat in the ring, do talks. We've got people that do yoga sessions. We've got people to do meditation sessions. So if there's a specific area that you've got an interest in, do a session. There's webinars. Your wellbeing team will have lots of opportunities for you to be able to kind of share some of that knowledge. So I definitely say put your hand up and show your interest.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.